Welcome to the first round of the annual National English Debating Tournament. My name is Dérch, and I will be serving as your moderator today. I would like to start off by introducing our honorable panel of judges, Mr. Jonathan Warner, Headmaster of British School of Ulaanbaatar, Ms. Nүүrсхүчлийн, English language lecturer, Ms. Inkhmurung from Good Foundations Law. Now, our motion for today is this House would tax every organization on their carbon emissions to combat climate change. And on my left-hand side today, representing the proposition team, is Erdenet High School's Omega team. And right in front of me is the opposition team from the Educated Enterprise School's Very Educated team. And Ms. Ondra will be serving as our timekeeper for today. Now, to begin this debate session, I would like to invite the first proposition team member on their position.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the first speaker of the proposition team, and he's the second speaker of the proposition team. His name is Sheer Jones, and lastly, he's the third speaker of the proposition team. His name is Erdenet. And we define this house as the whole world because the climate change is a global problem and we should all fight it. And definition of organization. We define an organization as a company, corporation, or factory that emits large amount of CO2 or CO into the atmosphere. For example, only 100 companies are responsible for 71.3% of all the carbon emissions in the atmosphere since 1988. Our sources from the CAI, also known as the Climate Accountability Institute. And our definition too is what's a carbon tax. Under carbon tax, the government sets a price that emitters must pay for each ton of greenhouse gas emission they emit. And it will incentivize business to switch fuels or adopt new technologies to reduce their emission, to avoid paying or to lower the tax they must pay. What's a climate change? Definition 3. What's a climate change? Climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperatures and weather problems. These shifts may be natural, such as through variations in the solar cycle. But since the 1800s, human activities have been the main driver of climate change. Primarily due to burning fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. Burning fossil fuels generates greenhouse gas emissions that act like a blanket wrapped around the earth, trapping the sun's heat and raising temperature. Examples of greenhouse gas emissions that are causing climate change include carbon dioxide and methane. These come from gasoline to drive a car or coal to heat a building. For example, clearing land and forests can also release carbon dioxide. Landfills for garbage are a major source of methane emissions. Energy, industry, transport, buildings, agriculture, and land use are among the main emitters. Under argument 1 is the goals of carbon tax. Carbon tax has 3 goals. Emissions reduction, immediately cutting down on how much carbon is emitted. Clean, and the second goal is clean, renewable energy growth. Incentivize corporations to switch and invest in other kinds of energy. Generating money through tax. The government gets new funds that they can use for combating climate change or helping citizens. Carbon taxes make the polluters pay for the problems they cause. Another argument 2 is carbon tax works where it exists. Example, Canada. An independent expert review of Canada's carbon tax program found that carbon pricing has helped reduce emissions. And we took this source from environmental journal. And our third argument is carbon taxes are better than a carbon trade. And the fourth argument is factory carbon emissions is the worst kind of emissions. Taxing individuals is not effective and not fair. We should tax the worst kinds of emissions and companies. And for our conclusion, carbon tax is the way to reduce carbon emissions the most, and we all have to know that the world is priceless. Thank you.
For your speech. Then I would like to call upon the first speaker of the opposition team.
Could we get a reading of the time, please? How long was the speech?
Oh, timekeeper, please tell us the duration of the speech.
5 minutes and 32 seconds.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the first speaker of the opposition team, and our team has a total of 5 points. And I'll be introducing the first 2 points, and my second speaker will talk about the next 3. Our team strongly disagrees with the motion that this House would not tax every organization on their carbon emissions to combat climate change. And our first point is that carbon tax may encourage tax evasion. If we tax organizations on their carbon emission, they might hide their true carbon emission. And replacing corporate income tax with the carbon tax would help governments crack down on tax evasion while also creating a powerful incentive to safeguard the environment. What is tax evasion? Tax evasion is an illegal activity in which a person deliberately avoids paying a true tax liability. Those caught in evading taxes are generally subject to criminal charges and substantial penalties. And the consequences are serious if you are caught. Our team's second point is that products will be expensive, leading to inflation. Many products are made with the help of fossil fuels, and these products will be expensive if we put a tax on them. Increasing the prices will increase inflation rate, and everyday necessities like aspirin, cell phones, and clothes, hygiene products are the products that are made with the help of fossil fuels. And inflation rate has already increased significantly ever since the pandemic has started in 2022. According to the and our third point, my second speaker will talk about the third point. And as I conclude my speech today, I wish to highlight some of the key messages in my discussion, so that carbon tax will encourage tax evasion, and products will be expensive, leading to inflation. And by these points, by these points that I have presented today, our team strongly believes that we shouldn't carbon tax organizations on their carbon emissions, and that is the end of my speech. Thank you. Three minutes and 47 seconds.
Thank you, first opposition speaker. I'd like to invite the second speaker of the proposition team.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the second speaker of the proposition team. My name is Shiru James. I would like to start my arguments. Assist with proposition 1. If we take carbon tax, they should stop emitting carbon emissions. But if they won't cut down carbon emissions, the tax quantity will increase monthly over and over until they bankrupt. So they can't emit carbon emissions. Without tax, without motivation, although it have goal, we can use those gather tax on renewable energy. We can use tax with renewable energy. Renewable energy is the best way to solve climate change. Okay.
Is there any other ways to combat climate change, reduce carbon emissions?
Yeah, but the strongest solving climate change is the renewable energy. Systems 1, 2. Carbon tax works in developing countries very well. According to Earth.org, there are 27 countries that does carbon tax. So we counted the developing country: Argentina, Colombia, Denmark, Kazakhstan, and Singapore. In conclusion, developing countries doesn't have economic assistance trade. Carbon trade is awaiting. Assistance for assistance trade is carbon emission that factories emitting is the harmful carbon emissions. So if I explain this, the factories emitting carbon emissions, this is the harmful emissions. Okay, so this is the #1 problem because our world is burning. So if I against them, she said that carbon tax is no safe. There can be criminal. If we take tax as a whole world, I would say United Nations would get tax. So this is the safest way because United Nations have a good way, the best privacy. So if they take taxes, they are so safe in the tax. In conclusion, the carbon tax is the best way to solve climate change because we can use these taxes with renewable energy, and if you take taxes, the factories or companies that are making carbon emission should stop emitting carbon emission. Thank you very much.
6 minutes and 49 seconds.
Thank you for your remarks, second proposition team member. Now I'd like to invite the opposition team, the second speaker, please.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the second speaker of opposition team. Today, our team believes that this House wouldn't tax every organization on their carbon emissions to combat climate change. Firstly, I'll expand on our first 2 arguments, and then introduce new 3 arguments. And then lastly, I'll provide some negations. Our first argument is that carbon tax may encourage tax evasion dodging. Tax evasion has negative impacts on the growth of the welfare of the society and economy, and because the loss in the tax revenue leads to lower levels of public good and lower income, the consequence is pretty serious. When you're caught cheating in your taxes or hiding assets, the organization must pay the full amount of taxes owing plus interest in any civil penalties assessed by the CRA. You may be fined up to 1/200 of the taxes evaded. One of the impact is the fall in government revenue, which can lead to higher tax rates, which will negatively affect others. and the services that citizens receive, such as like building kindergartens for the toddlers and hospitals and the medicines for the citizens. Because services that citizens receive cause significant loss of revenue to the community that could be used for funding improvements in health, education, and other government projects. And our second point is that products will be expensive and the inflation rate will rise. Products that are made of or made with the help of fossil fuels will become more expensive because the production costs are increasing and the organizations will most likely to raise their price. Our necessities such as aspirin, medicines, batteries. Yes.
You said that tools emitting carbon emissions. So there's so there are another way to carbon emit.
Yeah, there are other ways to emit carbon, but taxing isn't the best way to like combat climate change. There are other ways to combat it. And continue to my point. Increase our necessities such as aspirin, medicines, batteries, CDs, cell phones, clothes, cups, and even our hygiene products such as shampoo, or the products that are made with the help of fossil fuels. The price will increase when the price increases. Inflation occurs when the price rises due to increases in production costs such as raw materials and wages. For example, if the price of copper rises, companies that use copper to make their products will increase the prices of their goods. Inflation rate is already so high since the year 2020 due to the pandemic COVID-19, as the government spent more money on the social benefits for the citizens. If we tax the every organizations, the inflation will continue to increase. Countries such as Turkey, Israel, Greece, Italy, Spain, and US are at their highest inflation rate during the last 2 years. According to the CESIFO, an increase in carbon tax by $10 per ton of CO2 equivalent increases inflation by 0.1 pp. And our new argument is that monitoring and administration costs may be significant. Many people are needed to collect and monitor the companies in order to assure that they are paying their carbon tax in a legally compliant manner. Part of the tax income will be lost due to the administration costs, reducing its efficiency. The average tax examiner's salary is around $570,000 as of October. The salary range typically falls between. And our fourth argument is that small and low-income organizations will go out of business. Some industries that are heavily dependent on fossil fuels as their primary energy source. Small low-income organizations will have hard time due to this tax, since the production costs will skyrocket and they'll go out of business because they're unable to pay. And 49% of low-income organizations fail due to this tax. And our last argument is that effectiveness depends on the design of the tax. Industry experts are needed to design and adjust the regulatory frameworks in order to make the tax compliant with the national laws and also to avoid any loopholes in the system. So the design of every country of carbon tax is different. So it's not guaranteed that all carbon taxes will be effective. And moving on to my negation. Second speaker of the proposition said that carbon emission is the carbon emission is the harmful emitting gas, but there are many other gases that are more harmful than carbon dioxide. And he also said that carbon tax isn't the best way to combat climate change, but there are many other ways to combat climate change, such as we could the organization.
As before you said, only factories or organizations emitting carbon emission is so toxic, but other things are.
Okay. To my conclusion, our team has provided 5 arguments. Carbon tax may encourage tax evasion. The products will be expensive. Monitoring and administration costs may be significant. Small, low-income organizations will go out of business. And effectiveness depends on the design of the tax. Due to these reasons, our team strongly believes that this House shouldn't tax every organization on their carbon emissions to combat climate change. Thank you.
7 minutes and 43 seconds.
Thank you for your remarks, opposition team's second speaker. Now I'd like to invite opposition team's third speaker.
Hello, my name is Erdenet, and I'm the opposition team of third speaker. So I'm gonna start with the opposition team first argument. So to say that project might have high price, but isn't that global warming is number one? It's a problem going on, and they say there will be out of business, and if organization gets out, there will be less carbon emission. It's good for the environment. And you say that carbon dioxide, you said that there's more gases more harmful than carbon dioxide, but isn't that carbon dioxide comes from everything, such as human and organization and other? I think it's more, we think it has more percentage than other gas, such as methane and stuff. So in conclusion, these arguments are strong. We think that these arguments are stronger, so we are standing firm this.
2 minutes and 48.
Thank you for your speech, opposition team's third speaker. Now I'd like to invite the opposition team's third speaker.
Hello everybody, I am the third and final speaker of the opposition team. We are highly disagreeing with the motions, and I will be presenting our team's points and will be negating the proposition team's points. Our first point is may encourage tax evasion. And as our second speaker said, if we started taxing organizations, their carbon emissions, under carbon emissions, they will be likely to find a way to pay less tax or no tax, like not at all. Our second point is products will be more expensive, also known as inflation. If some organizations start paying for carbon tax, the product that they are selling will increase the price because they will be not making any profit from the product they are selling. And on another side, people who are buying the product will be less likely to actually buy the product because the price will dramatically increase. Our third point was small, low-income organizations will run out of business. This is pretty self-explanatory because small businesses spend a lot of money when they're making an organization, and they won't be able to pay a lot of money for carbon tax. And our final point is effectiveness depends on the design of the tax, so it's not guaranteed that carbon tax will be effective. I'll be now negating on the proposition team, starting with proposition second speaker. Since proposition first speaker did not have anything to negate. The proposition second speaker said renewable energy comes from generation systems that do not produce any kind of pollution, and these include solar energy, wind energy, and hydropower sources. Some companies can't start using these because they have to use like carbon. They will have to produce carbon for some of their products. And
point of information. You say that some product needs carbon emission, such as what?
for example, clothing. Clothing needs to, have the process to use carbon. And for the proposition third speaker, there's not. That was my speech.
Thank you for your speech, opposition team's third speaker. Now at this time, the first or the second speaker from each team will deliver a 4-minute reply speech. I'd like to remind everybody that point of information during reply speeches is not allowed. Now let us hear from the opposition team first. Opposition.
I will now present to you all for reply speech and introduce to you all with our main clashes today on today's debate. We still strongly believe in our motion that this House wouldn't tax every organization on their carbon emissions to combat climate change. We had 5 strong points. They were a carbon tax may encourage tax evasion. If we tax organizations on their carbon emissions, they might hide their true carbon emissions to pay lower tax. And our second argument was that products will be expensive and will lead to inflation. Products that are made of and with the help of fossil fuels will become more expensive since the production costs are more expensive, and these organizations are most likely to raise their price. And our third argument is that monitoring and administration costs may be significant and reducing its efficiency. And our fourth argument is that low-income organizations will go out of business. And our last argument was that effectiveness depends on the design of the tax. So it's not guaranteed that all carbon taxes will be effective. And I will now talk about the main clashes on today's debate. The main clash was about the most harmful gas and the best way to combat climate change. The proposition team has said the most harmful carbon dioxide was the most harmful gas, but there are many other more harmful gases that are being emitted. And they said carbon tax is the best way to combat climate change, but it is not. In our opinion, like switching to clean energy sources are more effective, such as solar energy, wind energy, like hydropower, and it's not guaranteed that carbon tax will reduce carbon emissions. So our team's arguments were strong and clear and easy to understand, and the proposition team didn't provide any negations on our 3 points. And so due to these reasons, our team still strongly believes that our team won today's debate. Thank you.
3 minutes.
Thank you, second speaker of the opposition team. Now let us hear from the proposition team for 5 speech.
Now I'm ready for flash speech. They said product will be expensive because of carbon tax. But if there is a renewable energy factories, we don't tax them because they don't emit carbon dioxide, so they would be cheap. If I explain more, some products will be expensive because carbon emission have tax and they nearly to bankrupt, so they increase their costs of products. But if you use renewable energy, we don't have to tax them, and so they have been cheap. They said full fossils, prove fossils full. No, they didn't say pre-processed full product can't be existed. Any kind of product can do it. Renewable energy factories. So as we have seen, using carbon tax is the best way to incentivize companies to use renewable energy. We can tax and we buy renewable energy such as solar, water, and wind powers, our taxes, and the clean energy is renewable energy. They are exactly the same thing. So we are confused about where is the money to buy renewable energy. They need taxes. We need taxes, and we can buy renewable energy, and so there would be no carbon emission, and our nature would be so beautiful still. And we are natures. Would be happy if nature is beautiful. We are happy. In conclusion, that we use taxes to renewable energy, and renewable energy have no carbon emission. So yes, this is good for world, and we stand firm in our Erdenet. Thank you.
3 minutes and 3 minutes 1 second.
Thank you to both of you for concluding today's debate. Congratulations on a job well done. Now let us hear our judges' feedbacks.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for your time, your efforts, and your research, which was certainly detailed. I think there's a couple of things we need to look into. You are touching on points of information, but you're not using them properly. Every individual speaker should be taking at least 2 points of information over the course of their speech. I don't think any speaker was actually offered 2 points of information, so you couldn't even do it. So as debaters, you are not reading notes. You are debating at point, and that requires interplay and communication. Neither team, I felt, used POIs well. You're not offering them, and they've got to be relevant to what someone has said. You can't just come in with a completely different point that has no relevance to what somebody is speaking about at that time. Your speech is where you do that. That's not the right time to do it. Now, one or two did, one or two didn't. So that's an area I think we need to address. There were clear attempts to rebut information that had come up before. Refutations are really important within debating. Sometimes though I felt they rather swallowed your speech, and that was the majority of what you had to say, and then beyond that, sometimes the developed points, the take on beyond there, rather ran out of steam. Almost all of you were very, very short. You didn't use your time, and that's quite a big flaw in a debate. I've only got one person here who I feel has actually used their time effectively. So what you need to do to move forward is think about how you structure your speech, not only as an individual, but as a team. So both sides need to do this. Your proposition or opposition, your first speaker, their job is to make those definitions, which you did very well, or to challenge them, which you also touched upon, but I'd say less clearly. But what are you going to say? Now, it's not okay to say, I'm going to talk about argument 1, 2, 3, and the next guy's going to talk about 4 and 5. What are they? What are you actually going to say? I'm going to talk about carbon capture techniques. I'm going to give you an example about Canada or Sweden. My friend is going to discuss an entirely different aspect of how this works. Numbering your arguments tells us nothing. Telling us a little signpost of what each element is about, that's what you need to do. You're clearly in a place where you've looked at lots of different bits and pieces of information. You've put together some good research. I'm not quite certain how well you understand all of it. And there's one or two situations where you've read words which you can't pronounce. And I'm not sure you know what they are. Don't do that. If you don't know what it is, look it up and rewrite it. And none of you, I'll give you a little tip, guys. Standing there with a piece of paper like this doesn't make you look confident or strong. It actually makes yourself feel nervous. Okay? So flicking through a notepad, don't do that. Fold it up, make it small, and go through them one by one, because that isn't obvious if it shakes. And no one else knows if you're worried inside. You will shake, your heart is pumping, your adrenaline is going, your body is moving. It cannot be avoided, but it makes every single human being on earth feel nervous. They look like they look nervous, and your perception in this game is very, very important. So, there are definitely areas which we can focus upon to try and raise your game a little bit, and I'm trying to be constructive with my critique. I found that very tight. There were good performances on both sides. There were weaknesses on both sides. I have to say, for me, it's very tight. I gave 190 to the proposition, but 210 to the opposition. So for me, the opposition have it narrowly. Thank you.
First of all, thanks for participating in this debating tournament. And yeah, generally, you should prepare more. For example, you should maintain proper body language, as you mentioned, right? So, but generally it is very good. And as for the score, I give proposition 240 and opposition 225. Okay, thank you.
All right, so my turn. Right? Sorry, what's your name? No, your name. Okay, so I'm gonna give feedback for each of you. You did good job, but you did not introduce yourself, and you introduced your teammates. And I think that was good job. And you can next time you can also introduce yourself. And opposition team was good. You were good, but also like I think you should be more eye contacting with us and then look at us for more engaging. And second, you did good job by asking them. Both of number one's opposition and proposition, you were like kind of engaging with us and raising questions, which are like really good quality of the debating as well. And the number three, all of you, you did pretty good job, but a little bit nervous. The other one also raised critical thinking questions, and that's really good. And yeah, all of you did good, but I think you can be like, you can take his advice on that. Thank you. Oh, I give 198 for the proposition team and 233 for the opposition team.